Stand aside, Elden Ring. I have a new favorite game. Et c'est français. I had such a wonderful time playing Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I laughed. I cried. I raged. I swear I made that parry. It was overall such an amazing experience. So when I finally wrapped up my first playthrough after doing all the side content, much like Alicia, I wasn't ready to leave the canvas yet. Decided to try a challenge run. Now, Clair Obscur is a turn-based RPG where you fight bosses with a party of 3 characters, with a backup team of 2 others if all 3 die. Most of the combat is centered around developing synergies between your team, using skills from one character to buff or revive the other. But what if you decide to go it alone? With the only synergies coming from your solo character's build, and if you die, well, that's it. How hard is it, really? So this video is a story about how I did a solo character run in Clair Obscur Expedition 33. The rules of the challenge are simple. Start the game. Play it having only a single person in your party until you roll credits. On the rare occasions in which the game forces you to have multiple party members, only one can do actions. The others have to pass. But which character should we pick? Like most of the internet, my first thoughts turned to Maëlle and her sweet, sweet Tldr skill. But then I thought, nah, that's too easy. We want this to be a real challenge run. And I was worried that Tldr and Gommage would just destroy everything. Mind you, this is by design. As the game's director, Guillaume Broche, explained in a recent interview, the joy that you get from exploring and finding new skills that will let you decimate a tough boss is one of the feelings that he wants to transmit to his players.
Simon. Tout joueur de Final Fantasy X pourra dire que quand tu fais tout le contenu annexe et que tu arrives au boss de fin et que tu le one-shot, c'est un peu cool.
Ah ouais?
Ouais.
But I don't want joy. I want pain. In other words, I want to do a Soul-style challenge run in a non-Souls-like game. So in a game that's Final Fantasy X meets Sekiro, we're going to focus on the Sekiro part. I decided to pick the character that, in my first playthrough, was the weakest, Lune. In my first run, I was essentially using her as a healer and as someone who could apply fire to set up Maëlle for big damage. So in this run, Lune will be my main and go on her own big adventure. I mean, it makes sense. She has so much main character energy, and is definitely the hottest chick in the game. Well, except for obviously Golgra. We're also going to avoid doing side content as much as possible and play on expert mode. Because, what do you think I am? Some kind of casual? Don't answer that. So with this strategy in place, let's get started. We start as Gustav and rush through the prologue of the game. We see Sophie and all our friends Gommage and set off on the expedition to kill the paintress. Gustav starts alone, so there's no problem enforcing the solo player restriction. But very quickly, we meet our heroine, Lune. Gustav, thank you for your service. You can go now. Although I had found that Lune's damage wasn't so great at the endgame, I figured she'd be pretty good at the beginning. She does fire damage, which inflicts burn on the enemies, adding a little bit of extra damage every round. Burn also has a lot of synergies in the early game with Pictos, for example critical burn, which gives you 25% increased critical chance on burning enemies. Awesome. The only problem is, she's really squishy. And with no one to resurrect her, if she goes down, that's it. So we're going to have to be strategic and only fight difficult enemies that have a reward so good it's worth working to no-hit them. So not you. We saunter through Spring Meadows uneventfully, and then it's time for the first boss, L'évêque. Let's see how it goes. Huh, looks like I'm a bit rusty. After that warm-up, I started to remember the timings, and Lune gets her first big kill. By the skin of her teeth. We then head to Flying Waters. We find the entrance to the manor and meet up with Maëlle and the curator. The curator teaches us jump attacks and helps us train. No, put the rapier away, Maëlle. You're not playing now. So now that we've honed our skills, we continue under the sea, making sure to pick up all the useful Pictos that we can. For example, as a solo player, it was a bit of a pain and kind of tedious to fight the Bourgeon. But the Picto that he drops, Augmented Counter, gives us 25% extra counterattack damage, so totally worth it. We then head to face the boss of the Flying Waters, Globu. Spoiler alert, this was the hardest fight in the run. Well, the second hardest. Globu only has a couple of attacks, so although one of them has an annoying delay, they're not that hard to learn. But shortly after the fight begins, he grows red and blue flowers and sucks them up. The blue flowers give him shields, and the red flowers buff him so that his attacks do more damage. Now, when you're playing in a group, it's not a big deal, because you just get one person to destroy the flowers or the shields, and the others can damage him. But when you're solo, you have to choose between trying to destroy the flowers and prolonging the fight potentially indefinitely, or ignoring them and trying to kill Globu as quickly as possible, making sure that in the latter part of the fight you play perfectly, because any hit will one-shot you. Eventually, after like an hour, I lock in and don't miss a parry. And Globu finally goes down, and we continue on our journey. We pass through the ancient sanctuary on our way to find the Gestural village. So while we're wailing on some second patats, it's a good time to talk strategy. Lune is one of the more complicated characters in the game to play well, which is possibly why I couldn't get the most out of her on my first playthrough. Skills and some other mechanics in the game can generate stains of different elemental types, and these stains can be used to meet the conditions for bonuses with other skills. I picked up the Lightering weapon for Lune in the Spring Meadows. This seal's special effect is that it reduces the AP required to cast a fire skill by 1. In the first portion of the game, the two main fire skills that we have access to are Immolation, which is very basic but doesn't cost much IP, and Wildfire, which creates a very useful area of effect. Using Wildfire also generates 1 fire stain and 1 light stain, so 2 stains at a time. You can then use the skill Mayhem, which costs only 3 AP, to consume those stains and deal high elemental damage. If we have 4 stains in our seal, and if the enemy's posture bar is filled up, when we consume them using Mayhem, we will, quote, break them, i.e. stun them. If the enemy is stunned, they take more damage and they skip a turn. So we also want to break as much as possible. With these two considerations in mind, in the first portion of the game, I was essentially just casting Wildfire twice, followed up by Mayhem. And while this worked well for Globu and the ultimate second patat, we will eventually want something more powerful.
Yes.
Searching the internet, I found that, quote, Lune one-shot builds have 2 basic forms. Their first one uses a seal called the Scaverim to generate special dark stains, which can greatly increase the damage of Lune's skills. I was intrigued by this idea, until I saw that the Scaverim is dropped by the Scavenger boss in the Falling Leaves. I remember this guy from my first playthrough, and no thank you. The second build, popular on the internet, uses the Kralum, which, in a nutshell, gives a bonus to alternating the kinds of damage that you deal. Pair this bonus with skills that deal multiple kinds of damage at once, like Elemental Trick and Elemental Genesis, and you've built yourself a nuke. Well, at least that's what they say on Reddit. The Kralum is dropped by the Chromatic Orphelin in the Yellow Harvest, which is slightly less painful than the Scavenger. So let's go for that. On our way, we pass through the Gestural village, where Lune gets her ass handed to her by Ciel. I mean, I think this is pretty lore accurate. And then we head to Yellow Harvest to try to get our weapon. We're a bit underleveled for Yellow Harvest, but the main level's not too bad. Where the first boss we need to get through to get our Kralum is Glaze, and this guy doesn't mess around, especially with the awkward timings of his ground pounds. I decide that we need more firepower, so I decide to fight some Gestrals in the hidden arena. We best Dominique Littlefeet, Bertrand Big Hands, and his other friends to get a whole set of Pictos designed to make solo play more accessible. The best one is called Last Stand Critical, which gives a 100% critical chance of fighting alone. Once we're constantly doing crits, Glaze doesn't present much of a challenge, and we can progress to the boss that is guarding our Kralum, the Chromatic Orphelin. This boss is actually pretty hard. The Chromatic Orphelin is accompanied by 2 other orphan friends, and you have to kill all 3 in order to get the Kralum. And this is not easy. Their attacks can give the Blight status effect, which reduces your HP by 10% for each stack. And they have this weird spin to win move, which took me a really long time to learn the timing of. After a bunch of attempts, I got so close. The Chromatic Orphelin and one of his buddies was down, and there was just one left. And I choked. Big time. Disheartened, I decided to continue with the main story and return later when I have a bit more HP and some better Pictos. After settling a domestic dispute between Escalating and Francois, we head to Stonewave Cliffs to fight the Landmaster. The double wildfire into mayhem strategy worked well. And also, I was stuck on the Lampmaster for a long time in my first playthrough since I didn't catch the whole lamp lighting test thing. Idiot. This actually had some benefits because I came to know the moves fairly well. And we kill the Lampmaster on the second try. We say goodbye to Gustav and hello to Verso and continue our journey in Act 2. A bit more beefed up, we make short work of the chromatic overlay and get our precious Kralin. We don't yet have enough skill points to get the skill Elemental Genesis, which is a crucial part of the, quote, one-shot build. So we make do with Wildfire, Mayhem, and Thunderfall when we fight the Pontiff Rolana in the Forgotten Battlefield. We then head north to recruit our bestest friend Monoko into our party. Oh, that Monoko, he's such a good boy. I have to work a little bit to learn our favorite buddy's moveset, and then we go to Old Lumiere. After Monoko, we finally have enough skill points to unlock Elemental Genesis, but we don't get a chance to try out our new playstyle right away. Our adorable but idiotic canine friend blows up a building, separating our team. In Crisis, we can't play as Lune anymore. I have to upgrade my Elle from 0 to get her through the level, but we make it to the second fight with her dad, Renoir. Okay, let's finally see how this Lune one-shot build works. First, we do Elemental Trick to set up stains of 4 different types, then Elemental Genesis for hopefully massive damage. Oh my god. Okay, not bad. Not exactly what I would call one-shot, but I'll take it. Miles' dad, who's not angry, he's just disappointed, he barely lasts a minute with the Elemental Trick into Elemental Genesis strategy. And now we go fight the Axons. To make things more manageable, I decide to fight the extra bosses that will weaken the main Axons. I kill the unsuspecting Tldr for the anti-charm Picto, and the emotional mask to weaken Visage. With these precautions in place, I fight Siren in the sand. Turns out we're wearing the same outfit. How embarrassing. And then we fight the Mask Keeper, whose combos are pretty elaborate. But he's really no match for Elemental Genesis. The Barrier Breaker sword in hand, we scale the monolith and run into Miles' dad for the 3rd time. This fight is actually my favorite in the whole game. The moves are cool, and they build on what we learned in the previous fight. There's a second phase kind of fake out, and the soundtrack is just amazing. Let's just listen to it for a sec. Now that's not to say the fight is easy.
Oh, come on!
But we get him in the end. And now it's time for the hardest fight of the game, both technically and emotionally, the Paintress. The Paintress, played by Jaheira from Baldur's Gate 3, look it up, has a lot of health. And at this point in the game, your damage is capped at 9,999. So you can have as strong a build as you want, like I do here, but your maximum damage will only go so far. Furthermore, she has multi-part attacks that stun you if you miss parrying or dodging even a single part of them. In my first playthrough, I didn't think much of the Paintress. I had Lune to revive and heal my party members, and Verso and Mael to keep doing damage. But here, if I miss a parry, and Lune gets stunned, well, it's game over. This boss took me a long time, because there's really no other option than to practice and get good, learning the timings for all the different moves. I finally beat the second phase, and then it was on to the final one, which actually turned out to be trivial, since it turns out that if you don't have Verso in your party, well, she shields Lune instead. So that was a surprise, and actually made me feel even sorrier for poor Aline, who's clearly become irrational with grief. Act 2 finished, it was time to head back to Lumiere and face off for the 4th time with Mael's dad. But first, I have a confession to make. I said that in this challenge, we would try to avoid doing side content as much as possible, as to keep the challenge run, well, challenging. But after the Paintress, I got cold feet. The Paintress fight was a bit rough, and so I was worried that Renoir Part 4 would be brutal. So I decided to go to Frozen Hearts for a bit to level up and get some upgrades. It turns out that this wasn't necessary, And by the time we got back to Renoir, who, by the way, was making some pretty valid points about living and working through grief, we were, as the kids say, OP. Now there's the one-shot build I've heard so much about. Renoir's no slouch, but in a couple of tries we're able to tell Maël's dad that he's not the boss of us, and to go home, old man. Finally, we must make the choice about who we're going to side with at the end of the game, Maël or Verso. Do I want to live in a simulation for a couple years playing God and not caring about how others feel about it? Or do I want to return to my real family and do the difficult work of coming to terms with my brother's death and living with my disability? It's a tough choice, but it's clear which one is best for Lune, Maël's ending. And so that's how Lune's big adventure comes to an end. So, how hard was it, really? Honestly, not that hard. Because of how the mechanics work, it's really easy to do crazy damage, even as a solo player. The real challenge comes from not getting completely destroyed by the bosses when you've no one to heal or revive you. When you play with a normal party, the turn taking is usually pretty even between you and the boss. Even if you don't have much agility, you're usually only just alternating turns with the boss. But in solo mode, the boss can play up to 3 or 4 times before you get a chance. So it really means that you have to kind of get good at parrying and dodging just to survive. But that was the whole point of the challenge. And so, in conclusion, I would recommend trying a solo run to anyone who wants to experience Clair Obscur in a new way.